Hey there. So, it's been a while since I got to make a video, and I'm going to go ahead and try to make this the best that I can. I'm probably going to try to do the whole thing in one shot rather than just um, break it up because at this point, I don't have a whole lot of time, and I kind of want to get to other things, if you will. I I have other things I want to talk about on this channel other than just the story of my life. So I want to try to get through it as fast as I can and kind of hit some highlights and give you a decent idea of the rest of the story. So where we left off is when I just bought my first car and everything. So my little sister Lydia was born that year, and she was pretty sick. She swallowed meconium, and her lungs were underdeveloped. She had underdeveloped kidneys, and um, just was really really sick when she was born. And yeah, that she would, like, they kept her on an incubator for a really long time, and she was on what was called an ECMO machine. And for any of you that have ever seen an ECMO machine, it's pretty scary stuff. And it was like it's like a heart lung machine or whatever. It oxygenates your blood for you, so you don't have to breathe, so your body can rest and heal. And um, I remember she had to be on that for quite some time. And then I remember the first time I got to hold her. Um, I got to hold her, and I remember she looked up at me and she smiled, and then her eyes rolled in the back of her head, and she completely stopped breathing. And I just remember panicking, like, somebody take this baby, and she basically tried to die right in my hands, and that was pretty interesting. Not really interesting, more like terrifying, I guess, was more of an accurate word for that. Um, so yeah, that's the first time I think I remember seeing my dad cry. Um, my mom was pretty broken up about it, and it's just a really rough time on my family. Um, but she pulled through. She's doing good now, and just a normal, 15-year-old kid now, 16-year-old kid almost. She's driving, so that kind of freaks me out. But yeah, I'm 16 years older than her, so it's more like a kid than my little sister. But it's still really cool and love her. But I remember about that time I got my first girlfriend. Her name was Ashley, and I remember dating her for a while. And my sister dated a guy named Bobby who played guitar, and that was where like my interest in music really started. Uh, yeah, I remember we ended up breaking up because at the time I was like straight edge, didn't do anything, like never would touch anything. Uh, you know, all I did was smoke cigarettes or whatever. I wouldn't touch anything else. I wouldn't touch alcohol, no drugs, no nothing. And I remember she came over drunk one night. We were supposed to go to some concert the next day or whatever. So she spent the night at our house, and uh, stayed with my sister or whatever, because my parents wouldn't have let her stay in the same room as me or anything. So yeah, just a couple of days later, it turned into a fight because I was like, why the heck? I don't like drinking and stuff, so why would you come over here like that? And just turned into a big fight, so we ended up breaking up from that. Um, Sometime between my 16th and 17th birthday, I decided that joining the Marines was going to be a good idea for me. So I went to MEPS or whatever. For those of you that are military, you'll know what MEPS is. So I went in and signed up to be in their like high school, program or whatever, so that I could go to boot camp and get all that done with before I graduated high school. So that way, when I graduated high school, all I'd have to do was go to MCT and training and get through with that, and it would just turn out to be okay, and I could just skip a bunch of steps and get a bunch of stuff done early. So I started drilling with them, started learning all the drill movements, a little DNC, and getting ready to ship off to boot camp sometime in that phrase or that time frame or whatever. So all the while, things at my house were going from bad to worse. My mom and dad were pretty fractured from the stress of everything that happened with Lydia, and my sister and I didn't really want to be at home. My mom at that time started working at Captain D's as well. My dad and my sister would get into these fighting, cursing matches all the time. My mom was constantly in the middle of all of that, and one day my sister decided to get extremely lippy with my dad and cursed at him and said "F you" or something. And my dad got really abusive really fast with that because he didn't tolerate it. Like, we'd always grown up in military household, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Like, that's how we were raised. And so you didn't mouth off to your parents, you didn't mouth off to adults, and you especially didn't curse at them. And so my dad just lost it and got abusive and hit her. And my mom got fed up with it, and she just left, and my sister with her. And that's when things kind of went through the floor real fast. I remember that night my dad snapped, and he went upstairs to his room and started loading his shotgun to kill himself, and he was going to take his own life. And I didn't know what he was doing up there, so I kind of wanted to see what was going on or how I could, support the situation. So I ran upstairs and saw my dad loading the gun. So I went in there and tore the gun out of his hands and somehow managed to wrestle him to the bed that he was on or whatever. And I remember pulling the gun out of his hand. I remember throwing him on the bed, and I remember yelling at him and just being like, "Hey, you have to grow up, basically. Like, you have a family that you have to take care of. Like, I understand that, your wife is gone and she left, but this isn't going to fix the situation. Like, you got to grow up and realize that you still have responsibilities. Like, taking your own life's not going to get you out of this. Like, you screwed up. You have to fix it, So I remember, like, as a 16-year-old, I remember that happened, and somehow it got through him, so he sobered up and realized. So then that's when he started, trying to get right with my mom. But by that time, the damage was too far gone, and his streak of abusiveness had just hit the fan at that point in his life. And about this time or whatever, I started self-mutilating, and I started cutting myself to deal with the stress of life, basically. And it wasn't a good thing to do, but it's something that I did around that time. And my mom got her own apartment, and my older sister and I ended up moving in with her. My mom filed for divorce and got the younger 3 children full-time, along as well as me and my older sister. And I quit talking to my dad altogether after that for many years, and I quit going to church, quit talking to my old friends. Basically just went dark. Like, I completely abandoned everything. Like, I didn't want to have anything to do with anybody. My entire foundation was just gone. I was empty. Like, I had nothing. I knew nothing. I didn't care. I hated everything. It destroyed me. Like, when you're raised in the church and you're told, like, these are things you never do, like, these are unbreakable rules that you just don't break. You don't get divorced. You don't, like, when you're married, you're always married. Like, you don't turn your back on God. You don't turn your back on each other. So everything that I'd ever been taught in my entire life was erased in just a few short weeks. And I just didn't care anymore. I didn't want anything to do with any of it. I just was in it for me and myself and whatever I was going to do. About this time, I was fully accepted into the Marine Corps program. Went through MEPS, got told by a gunnery sergeant that I was a piece of crap. I was a gang member and all this other stuff because I had, carved stuff into my body when I was mutilating. He didn't agree with anything that I had, and my recruiter told me that it was no big deal. We just would have to get some tattoos to cover up the scars and, some real patriotic hula hula stuff, and, we'll have to get them covered up, and then we'll go back and get in. So I had to get a statement notarized from my mom to get the ink work done. So I picked a cross for my chest and an eagle with the cow skull on my arm. It basically symbolized the fact that I was born in Texas, grew up in Texas, was American, blah, 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 blah. So I was able to get through MEPS and get signed up for the Marine Corps and finally get sworn in and all this other stuff. So keeping on here, when I went dark, I went gothic. Like I was full out piercings, mohawk. Uh, Basically, I turned into the kid that you don't want your kid to hang out with. Like I was that kid. Like you see those kids with all the piercings and skateboards and everything else. Like that was me. Like you would not have wanted your 16-year-old son to be friends with me. Um, like I asked out my first real girlfriend. Her name was Tony. She was obsessed with death. Like she had skulls, snake furs, like snake skins, furs, and stuff in her bedroom. She was into some really weird stuff. But at that point in my life, I liked it. That's what I was into. So, I mean, that's what I wanted. I wanted the world. I wanted the sin. I wanted the allure of all of it. And she was the world. I mean, she smoked pot. She liked me. Like she was, that was enough for me. Like she was weird. She would, you know, she would fill my emptiness for the time being. And like she was also a self-mutilator and had been through a lot of pain and abuse and stuff in her life. And not long after I met her, she introduced me to a guy named Sin, who also had dealt with a lot of pain and everything in his life and some bad situations and changed his name and everything else. And go figure, the name that he picked for himself was Sin. So he had a gothic industrial band over in St. Louis. And, I'd made up some story that I'd learned a little bit of bass guitar and whatever. He asked me if I wanted to play in a band with him. So I said yes, obviously. So he taught me some things about the bass guitar, and I learned a lot of stuff from him and hung out with him for a long time. I began playing live with him and got even more exposure to the world, hanging out with girls and just playing shows and doing all the stupid crap you shouldn't be doing. At this point, I started doing lightweight drugs and everything, and I loved playing music. It was intoxicating. Like it became my entire world at that point, and there was just nothing else like it. I just absolutely loved it. I began to do some light drinking about that time. Started going to parties. Started sleeping with my girlfriend. Like my induction to the world was like just starting, and I just loved it and just wanted to jump into it. So it just started getting worse. So yeah, next chapter here. So I broke up with that first like real girlfriend. I broke up with Tony because like she wanted me to sleep with other chicks or whatever while she was in the room or like ever. I don't know what part of my morality at the time thought it was a bad idea, but I was just completely and totally 100% against it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I guess in my mind, I looked at it as if she was wanting me to sleep with other girls, then she was eventually going to want to sleep with other guys. And if she wasn't already, like I had no idea whether she was or she wasn't, but it was just a means to an end. So for her, like it was just a way to get what she wanted out of it. And either way, I was totally not good with it. I was like, nope, I'm good. I don't want any part of that. But I did something equally as scummy and immediately started dating her best friend, whose dad was good friends with Sin. And even more oddly, my mom started dating her dad at about the same time, which was really awkward. I didn't date her for very long. I really have no idea why. I didn't really want to be in a relationship. I was just being selfish. And she waited around for me for a really long time because she really liked me and everything. And she was in love with me and I was in love with myself. And if she ever watches this, like, you know who you are, and I'm really sorry. It was a really crappy thing to do, and I regret it, but it was part of my life and it's part of what happened to me. About the same time, my mom and I moved into an actual house, which she managed to purchase, and my older sister moved in with us there as well as my youngest siblings, and I had a bunch of terrible friends at the time, and they all moved in with us too, which took my drug habit from bad to worse. I got into fights all the time at school, was suspended often. I liked fighting. It made me feel better about my life and took the place of mutilation. And I like to fist fight. I like to get into just brawls and just like to beat the crap out of people. I began smoking weed and drinking much more frequently. I quit playing music with Sin after a few concerts, and time began to be a real issue for me because I was working full time, and I drew back into my shell further and further. And at this point, I got more tattoos, officially dropped out of high school, and I was dropped from the Marine Corps entry program because I didn't graduate high school. So I started playing in a punk band that did like mostly punk covers and stuff like that. And yeah, it was one of my good friends that I started the punk band with. Her name was Candy, and she was a real straight edge chick, which is why she was hanging out with me. I had no idea. Her parents probably thought like I was a terrible person. Like I don't know. I loved Candy. Like she was awesome. Like I don't say loved in a fashion like I just loved her. Like I really did love Candy. Like she was like a sister to me. I didn't love her in a sexual way. Like it wasn't that she was black or that she was crazy or different or anything like that. I just loved her as a person. Like she was a great friend and she was a good person. And I don't know, but I believe that she was attracted to me physically. It eventually became an issue for us because she wanted to get more physical and I didn't. We played music though for close to a year, doing covers, having fun, just playing around. Might have been a little bit over a year. And about that time, I met a girl named Laura. She was a year or so younger than me. We met at the mall. We started dating a little bit, and her mom didn't really like me, which was understandable. So we didn't get to see much of each other and just spent a whole lot of time talking. She finally managed to convince her mom that I was okay. So we dated for a few months, and it just kind of fell apart, not due to not being able to hang out much. Like we both had busy schedules and everything. And I do remember that her cousin Rachel was really into me, and it caused some huge issues in between us. And like it may not seem important right now, but later on it comes in, and just kind of I was just a dirty scumbag at that point in my life. But about that time is when I met another Ashley, and Ashley was just like an infatuation of mine. Like she was the first girl that I ever really gave a piece of my heart to, and like the way we met and we dated and like we had a ton of family experiences together. We got really close. Like I was really like we were really in love with each other, and I started working for her dad in construction. I quit Captain D's for a summer. As I had some very brief experiences working with some guys in the church that I'd worked construction with them and done some roofing and everything. So I started working with him. I quit my job at Captain D's, and he treated me like a son. He bragged up my ability to all his business partners and everything, and he was, expanding his business. And then one day at work, Ashley broke up with me over text message and basically said that her feelings were too strong. She didn't know how to deal with them, and so we were gonna not see each other anymore. So for me, that was pretty crushing. And through all of it, we never slept together. We never got physical. We just really, really bonded. But I think that's what made her kind of stand apart from all the other girls that I was with, is that we didn't get physical. It was just really about the relationship and not anything to do with physicality. So I stayed working for her dad for a few more months. Eventually came out that he was embezzling from his own company and took off to Florida and left everyone else high and dry, and including all of his business partners. So myself and a guy named Todd still tried to go to work with one of the partners or whatever, but it all eventually just caved in. So I began dabbling with harder drugs during this part of my life and getting mixed up with the wrong sorts of people. I'm not really bitter about it. I learned a lot of valuable skills during that part of my life, and I ended up using a lot of those skills later on in life. So I'm not bitter about that part of my life. But so I went back to Captain D's, asked for my job back, and I didn't play that much music during that short part of my life. About this time, I turned 18. I remember we threw a party, me and my roommates. I got pretty wasted. Not much else happened except for the fact that now I was an adult. So after that, after I turned 18, I got promoted at work. I had to go to a different store and subsequently travel a whole lot farther. I bought a brand new car at that time. I bought a 2005 Hyundai Tiburon, which was Ashley's favorite car at the time. So I bought one of those. I don't know why. Maybe in the back of my mind I thought that maybe it would, bring her back to me or something. But So I started hanging out with these Mexicans that were friends of my friends, and yeah, we partied a lot with them, and they were druggies, and they just basically dragged me into a world that I wasn't ready for. I would get my drugs from them. They tried to get me to work for them and sell drugs with them, but I wasn't interested. And one of the guys did tattoos, so I got some more tattoos from him. Um, yeah, we had a falling out when one of them decided he was going to just take my car while I was sleeping and go do a drug deal in East St. Louis. And after that, we kind of had a falling out, and I didn't see a whole lot of them after that. Um, During that time frame is when I met Jeremy, and Jeremy was Tony's new boyfriend, and he saw me in a store, and she had told him all the worst parts about me in life, and he hated me something terrible. And so he was an ex-army guy and a few years older than me, and told me if he ever saw me again, he was going to beat the living daylights out of me, basically. And I said something stupid back, and we almost got into it in the middle of a store. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. So a guy I used to work with at a construction company, Steve, introduced me to his niece, my third Ashley in my life, and she was into the same stuff me and Steve were, doing drugs and everything else, and we just went out on some crazy, stupid adventures together, and should have probably been arrested about 500,000 times, but due to the grace of God, I'm still here, and nothing ever came of it. But never slept with her either. So one of the big things that happened with that Ashley, and the only reason I really bring her up, is the fact that I went to a big druggy party with her and her friends that was at a house right around the corner from mine. And the next day I was at my house by myself, kind of sleeping off a hangover or whatever. And the guy whose house it was came to my house and basically stuck a gun in my face and accused me of stealing all of his drugs. And I was like, what in the heck are you talking about? I obviously didn't steal your drugs, man. Like, where I live. Why would I be that stupid? And, your girlfriend, my girlfriend, they were all there. Did you ever talk to any of them? Like, they're thieves and everything. Like, maybe they're the ones that did it. And, he pressured me a bit more, told me he was going to shoot me and a bunch of other stuff. And eventually I managed to convince him that I wasn't the one that had taken his drugs, and showed him, the fact that I didn't have anything. And he eventually left and threatened that he'd come back or whatever if they didn't end up showing up. But he never came back, so I would assume that he either figured it out or didn't want to mess with me. But needless to say, I broke up with her pretty quickly after that. I didn't really have any more serious relationships after that. I dated on and off, but I couldn't really get into a relationship. All of them just seemed to kind of fail and go nowhere. So I'll just save the trouble of describing all those short relationships I had during that period of my life. But needless to say, I was no longer interested in women for their minds or what they could bring to the table relationally. Like, I was just interested in physicality. I'm just telling you this in full disclaimer. Like, I was a scumbag. Like, I was a piece of crap. I'm just telling you. I'm not bragging about myself. I don't glory in this stuff. Like, I'm ashamed of this part of my life. So, like, this is just the disgusting person that I was. So I found a new drug dealer. He was a black guy that will remain nameless. I don't need anybody hunting me down and figuring out where I am later in life. He was a gang member. He realized that, I had a lot of potential really quickly, and I was a people person. I had a shaved head and piercings and tattoos, and he thought I'd personally make a very good drug dealer. So he brought me into the dealing business. I started running drugs for him, and in exchange I got what I wanted, which was drugs and more alcohol and everything else. And he thought it would be a good idea to take me along with him when he did his drug deals. And he would give me a pistol before we left, and I would go with him on his drug deals. And I would prominently display the pistol and kind of stand there with my arms crossed and wear a trench coat and look like a big scary guy. I don't have any clue how I didn't end up dead at that part of my life, because, like, I had no idea what I would have done if somebody would have ever pulled a gun on me or done anything. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I was the guy that stood there and looked cool. Only once did things get really crazy and had to pull a gun, and a few other people pulled guns, and it was just a really scary situation. And, he smooth talked his way out of the situation. We all put our guns away, and it is just amazing how stupid I was at that point in my life. Like, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, that was the dumbest of the dumbest things that I could have ever done in my life. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest with you. So, yeah, pretty crazy. So that guy I mentioned earlier, Jeremy, well, he did find me again. We ran into each other at a convenience store not far from my house. He knocked on the window of my car, and like an idiot, I get out, and I was ready for a fight, so, I was all balled up and ready to go, but he broke up with Tony kind of for the same reason that I did, realized that she was kind of, I don't want to say crazy, but she had some issues at that point in her life. Like, I'm sure she's really happy and probably stable and everything now, but he broke up with her or whatever and wanted to apologize to me or whatever. So needless to say, we became friends, and he played guitar. I wrote songs. And one of our early songs that we wrote, we recorded it on an acoustic guitar and just me singing a cappella, and just raw vocals or whatever. So it got recorded by us, and a guy that we knew, his dad grew up with Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park, and he took the song with him because he liked it so much. The dad did. He took it with him to a radio show where he was going to go do a radio show with Chester Bennington in Nashville, Tennessee, and it got played by Chester Bennington back to back on the radio station that they had because he liked it so much. So that was a pretty cool highlight of my life. Like, I've been on the radio. So me and Jeremy built a band, and we got a drummer, and the guy Todd that I worked with, small world, right, was Jeremy's cousin, and also Ashley, the girl that I really liked, her cousin. And like I said, small world, all these people are interconnected. We got playing shows, got a manager, we would do little tours here and there, and we were competing in the Battle of the Bands before long. We never really got super far because we were a metal band and half of us were druggies, so it was, we just kind of played around, did some recording, had some fun with things, and it was just a good time for a while it lasted. I got to backtrack a little bit here because there were other things that happened, a ton actually that happened during that time. Just remember going forward that I'm playing music through all this with these guys in the background of all this other stuff. So my days as a drug dealer ended just before I was 19. When I was approached on my way back from St. Louis at a show or whatever, and he recognized me from being with the guy that I mentioned, and he pulled a knife on me and told me to give him everything that I had. And I thought, being a tough guy that I was, I said, if you're going to pull a knife on me, you're going to use it because I'm not scared of knives. So he did. He used it. He stabbed me in the chest underneath my ribs, and he started running. So being an idiot, I chased him and, didn't realize that I was bleeding all over the place until I looked down. I don't have any idea. It's a blur how I got back to the dude's house or whatever, but I got back to his house and he stitched me up and everything, and I told him I was done. Like, I wanted out. Like, I didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore because it's kind of, I don't know how I didn't die. Like, I didn't even go to the hospital because I didn't want anybody to know what happened. Like, you don't go to a hospital after you've been stabbed by somebody and just be like, hey, by the way, I'm a drug dealer. Like, I need to get stitched up. Like, that's not something you do. So, but still, like, I'm an idiot. Like, why didn't I go to the hospital? I don't know. I was not an intelligent person then. So another thing that happened during that time period that I remember is while I was getting rid of my little bit that I had left of stuff, I had to get rid of it all, so I had to sell it all. Somebody paid me in counterfeit bills, so I had to I went to the store to go pay my cell phone bill or whatever, and I tried paying my bill, and the lady's like, you can't, these are counterfeit, like, you can't, what are you doing? And like, for some reason she gave the bills back to me and was like, you can't pay with these. And I was like, okay. So I paid with a card or something and then left. But that, like, put me way back on my bills and stuff. I had invested pretty heavily in my little business that I had going on, and it was just kind of a bad deal, so it set me really behind. So it took me a lot of catching up to do. Um, so I remember a night, like not too far after that I was really down, depressed, and I just was by myself and just had nothing going for me. And I figured I would do a lot of hallucinogens by myself and uh, some other drugs. I mixed a lot of drugs that night, and I had the next day off, so I just did it. So I was like, whatever, and that was one of the worst nights of my life. I remember seeing demons marching around my house, and every time I would close my eyes, they'd be whispering in my ears, and these dark entities that were all around me, and shadow beings that wanted to scare me, and it was just awful. And, I remember somebody was there. I don't know who it was. I have no idea who it was, but somebody was there. They told me to eat a bunch of charcoal and get food. And I don't know how I dialed my phone. I was not coherent at all, but I called somebody when whoever it was, whatever being was with me at that point, told me to call this guy. So I called him up, and I remember talking to him, and he came over and got me, and my friend came over and got me, and I told him what was going on, and so he made me eat some more charcoal or whatever, and let me stay at his place and nursed me back to health overnight. So the next day I called up my friend Caleb from church, and we went to the zoo, of all things. We went to the zoo and we hung out, and I told him what I'd done, and he just listened to me. Like, he was the best. He's still just my best friend. Like, it's like a brother. He didn't judge me for anything that I did. He just listened. Like, he was just the best. He didn't tell me what an idiot I was. He just unconditionally loved me, and to this day I still thank him. Like, he is just the best friend that I could ever ask for besides Yeshua, because he is just like a brother to me. He's amazing. So right after that, I quit using drugs pretty much entirely. I smoked a little weed here and there, but I was pretty much done with that. So I just drank a lot of alcohol and everything, and so I started seeing a girl named Shelly that worked up at the store next to me where I worked at the store that was far away from my house. She was a Christian, and she worked at the restaurant next to me. She was really, really cool, but she was very different from me and had a rocky past, and I was immediately drawn to her, but our relationship didn't last long. I was really possessive at that point in my life, and she didn't like it, so I ended up running or pushing her away, just through whatever. So, but